may be marginalized and ignored in the mainstream media. Yet, we know that voices such as Amy Goodman's and Democracy Now! Are there, doing the day in and day out research and reporting on the causes and consequences of the political and economic disasters in our midst, and what people on the ground are doing to resist, overcome, and transform them. And now, to continue our celebration of the life and times of Connie Hogarth, it is my great pleasure to welcome Amy Goodman, the host and executive producer of Democracy Now! Welcome, Amy. Here today on Zoom across the country and around the world.
Oh my gosh, it is such an honor to be here, to honor Connie, to follow Emma's resolution. What a fantastic singing duo. I am looking forward to the documentary. And to follow Charlie Shiner, who is so seminal. WESPAC, right, that C at the end, Connie, Charlie, all the folks that have contributed, and now, well, it's the K, but my father, and so many others who have made WESPAC what it is, and this is the key, what it will be. Because the fact that Connie helped start this institution that continues through today and has so much to take on at this point. Oh, I also want to introduce Zazu. I think Connie would approve Zazu's name. Everyone always says, "Oh, Lion King," right? Well, I didn't know about that until after I named her that. But no, Zazu is named for the Zazu of occupied France, named for the young people in France who fought the Nazis, fought the Gestapo. They loved jazz and swing. They went to the underground expat clubs. But they knew what they stood for, and the Gestapo would get them, but they would continue to fight, and that's who Zazu is named for. They are the freedom fighters. She's a freedom fighter, but Connie Hogarth. I can't remember the first time I met Connie. I think she invited me to some event, but I became a lifelong fan. I have to say I'm a little glad that in 1994 she lost that primary for the New York State Assembly. Sorry, Connie. But think of what she created instead. She was an institution and she built institutions. I mean, the fact that she went from WESPAC to the Manhattanville Connie Hogarth Center for Social Action, going to where people were who didn't even know that they needed that center. But she constantly looked ahead. I was just reviewing some of the media that she was in. For example, when I think it was C-SPAN came to White Plains and they interviewed Connie, I mean, among the first words out of her mouth as she talked about her role models of Gandhi and King was quoting Dr. King, saying the choice is not between violence and nonviolence, but between nonviolence and non-existence. She taught every time she opened her mouth. And I can see her right there in the front row. Okay, enough, Connie, tell us more about other things right now. And as Charlie talked about intersectionality, before Kimberly Crenshaw coined that term, which is so important. I mean, that defines Connie's life, that every issue intersects with every other. That you can't talk about racial justice and economic justice and social justice without talking about peace, fair, just peace, without, the idea that peace is not just the absence of war, but you have to wage peace every day.
Every day.
We don't just achieve democracy. You have to fight for it every single day. Just think about this past week. I had the honor of interviewing Justin Jones on Friday. The Justin Jones and Justin Pearson, the two youngest black representatives in the Tennessee State House of Representatives. And they're expelled by the Republican supermajority in the House of Tennessee. That doesn't even represent the people of Tennessee. It's not as if Justin Jones, who was on Democracy Now! A few times, it's not as if it was his first go-around with Cameron Sexton, the House Speaker. Right? He was fighting him before he was a legislator. As a Black Lives Matter activist, when in 1920, when you walk into the Tennessee House of Representatives, into the Tennessee House Capitol, and you see the bust of Nathan Bedford Forrest, the founding Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, which was founded in Tennessee. And Justin Jones led the fight to remove that bust, and Cameron Sexton voted to keep it up there, greeting people as they came into the House of Representatives. But Justin won that one, as he will continue to win. And then having Justin Jones on, you'd think that the Montana legislature would learn from what happened in Tennessee, right? I mean, the idea that Zoe Zephyr, the first and only openly trans woman in the Montana House of Representatives, she represents Missoula, very close to my heart because my first college roommate was from Missoula. Her dad was the band leader of Hellgate High. Zoe Zephyr, she watches what happens to the Justins. They're expelled. But then, because of movements on the ground, like Connie built in Westchester, in Tennessee, they're fighting for her in both Memphis and Nashville, vote to put them back in. You'd think that would be a bit of a lesson to the Montana Assembly. But they too, when Zoe Zephyr stands up and speaks out and says she knew a young person, a young trans person who watched the hearings in the Montana House and attempted to take her own life. She said, when that happens, blood is on your hands, she said to the Assembly. And just like in Tennessee, they told her she had violated decorum. And maybe they learned a little. They didn't vote to expel her. They voted, though, to silence her. And they succeeded, maybe in the well of the House, but not in the United States of America. I mean, that voice is now so amplified, and I could just see Connie, if she were alive today, repeating Zoe Zephyr's words, blood is on your hands, and ensuring that people all over would hear this. But Zoe Zephyr and Justin Jones then talking to each other, what it means to take on fashion. Zazu grumbles at those words. No bones about it. And the fact that Connie not only led WESPAC, but also served on so many boards, was deeply involved with the first and second UN special sessions on disarmament as we cover the war in Ukraine, Putin violating every international law and with his brutality in invading Ukraine. But then what should happen today? What happens when you have a war that can lead to nuclear war? How does the world respond? Tomorrow we're spending the hour with Dan Ellsberg. And I think Dan Ellsberg, Connie Hogarth, and you may have heard that Dan just wrote a letter to all his friends saying he has pancreatic cancer. He feels his time is limited, but he wants to spend it continuing to fight the fight, just as Connie did. Is so deeply concerned about the use of small nuclear weapons, just as Connie was, not to mention the big ones, and the continuum between nuclear power and nuclear war. I mean, let's see, the first time Connie was arrested was at a die-in, right, against the Vietnam War. And she went to jail for weeks as a result of Seabrook. I was also at those Seabrook protests in the late 1970s. And, you know, the affinity groups there, they really presented a different model of decision-making. And they were so important even beyond nuclear power. And Connie making that connection very early on between nuclear power, fossil fuels, and climate change. She was talking about this well before so many others were. And being on the board of WBAI, of course, a place that is so close to my heart, Pacifica Radio, that Connie understood. It's about organizing, but it's also about getting the message out, but needing democratic institutions to do that. You know, she saw the media as a huge kitchen table that stretches across the globe, that we all sit around and debate and discuss the most important issues of the day, war and peace and life and death. And anything less than that is a disservice to the servicemen and women of this country, because they're the ones who are going to be sent to live or die. Anything less than that is a disservice to a democratic society. And Connie understood that, whether you're talking about police, or you're talking about service members, that everyone can be reached with a message of fighting for a just peace. But WBAI is so important, and that she devoted time to being on the board means so much to me. You know, and especially the old-timers here, the importance of Pacifica Radio, WBAI, the New York radio station. Of the 5 stations, right, founded in Berkeley in 1949 by a pacifist named Lou Hill, who came out of the detention camps and said there's got to be a media outlet not run by corporations that profit from war, but run by journalists and artists. And so KPFA was born. And then KPFK in Los Angeles, that was 49, KPFK 59, WBAI in 1960, WPFW, Jazz and Justice Radio, 1977, and KPFT in the Petro Metro in Houston in 1970. And that station, so important, because as soon as it went on the air, the Ku Klux Klan strapped dynamite to the base of the transmitter and blew it to smithereens. And when they got back on their feet a few weeks later and they rebuilt the transmitter, the Klan strapped 15 times the dynamite to the base of the transmitter and blew it up again in the middle of Arlo Guthrie singing Alice's Restaurant, which I actually think is a good song. And then, you know, months later, 1971, January, they get back on their feet again. Arlo comes back to Houston to finish Alice's Restaurant on the air. And I can't remember if it was the Grand Dragon or the Exalted Cyclops, because I often confuse their titles. He said it was his proudest act, because he understood how dangerous Pacifica is, dangerous independent media is. This is why Connie sat on the board of WBAI. Dangerous because it allows people to speak for themselves. And when you hear someone speaking from their own experience, whether it's a Palestinian child or an Israeli grandmother, whether it is an aunt in Afghanistan or an uncle in Iraq, whether it's a kid in the South Bronx or Standing Rock Sioux member in North Dakota taking on the Dakota Access Pipeline, when you hear them speaking for themselves, it changes you. Now, you may not agree with who you're listening to, right? I mean, how often do we agree with our family members? But it makes it much less likely that you'll want to destroy the person. It's because that understanding is the beginning of peace. I think the media can be the greatest force for peace on earth. Instead, all too often, it's wielded as a weapon of war. And that's why we have to take the media back. That's why Connie sat on the board of WBAI, understanding how critical it is that we have a media that's not brought to you when we cover War and Peace by Boeing and McDonnell Douglas. When we are covering the climate catastrophe, that we have a media that's not brought to you by the oil, the gas, the coal, the nuclear companies. As Connie knows well, from Seabrook to Indian Point, from 3 Mile Island to Shoreham. Now, I grew up in Long Island. My parents were very active in trying to prevent Shoreham from going online. Ultimately, it was, well, they flipped it on for a second just to make it radioactive. It is astounding what they did with Shoreham, but it was a people's movement that stopped it, and how important that was. And the question of where we go today when it comes to energy independence. These are the issues that Connie really led the way in at least asking the absolutely critical questions. And I'm so deeply grateful to Connie for that. I mean, Connie's presence in all of our lives changed us and changed the world. To lose Connie last year, I mean, we weren't really losing her. She had built so much, and that's what we're all responsible for continuing today. I wanted to also just talk about Timor, because the East Timor Action Network, what Charlie did with the East Timor Action Network, actually came out of, branched out of, WESPAC was the fiscal sponsor. And the idea that on the other side of the planet is a country that for a long time was connected to the US through the barrel of a gun. People in the United States didn't know that. When Indonesia invaded East Timor, 90% of the weapons were from the United States. The Indonesian army, the 4th largest in the world, was armed, trained, and financed by the United States. But through WESPAC, leading to East Timor Action Network at the national level, people came to understand in this country one of the great genocides of the late 20th century. I believe it was David Obey at the time, the Congress member from Wisconsin, who said after E-10 was born and organized all over the country, he got more calls on the issue of East Timor than on any other foreign policy issue. Wow. It took a number of years, but in 1999, the people of East Timor got to vote for their freedom. They cared deeply about what E-10 had done in the United States, and a similar organization done in Canada, and Australians against the occupation had done. It really mattered. And the fact that Connie Hogarth here in the United States understood power and understood we have a special responsibility here. Years ago, and I hope someone sees Azu somewhere.
Went that way.
Okay. Years ago, I interviewed a woman from Guyana about the Red Thread Collective there. And we use our music breaks to unseat people who've just finished a segment and to give time. So when you have someone like Emma's Revolution, you could go on and on, but just listen to them. You don't realize we're shooing people out and shooing people in for the next segment. So I was saying goodbye to her and welcoming the next guest for a segment on the U.S. elections. Democracy Now! Was the first daily election show in public broadcasting 27 years ago. She appreciates the applause. And I said to her, okay, well, we're going to do something on the U.S. election next. She said, oh, I'll be a guest on that segment. I said, oh, but why? And she said, because I believe everyone in the world should get to vote for president of the United States. And it was such a blessing to me, because what she was saying is, who you choose here matters to everyone in the world. Which brings us back to this level of activism that Connie was a center of a solar system in Westchester. Understanding that what you do locally, and it all starts locally, has implications all over the world. So I wanted to end with a poem. I don't know who wrote this poem. I think it was a teacher in Baltimore, and I added a few lines to it. Do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not here. I'm going to start again. Do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glints on snow. I am the sunlight on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. I am the full-throated chant from fight back to close it down to no more war. I am the voice joining millions around the world. Peace is what we are fighting for. When you awaken in the morning's hush, I am the swift, uplifting rush of quiet birds in circling flight. I am the soft star that shines at night. Do not stand at my grave and cry. I am not there. I did not die. Presente, Connie, hold on.